Let's dive into a hot topic. Fed Chair Powell claims Trump's tariffs forced the Fed to pause on rate cuts. Meanwhile, Europe seems to cheer despite its own trade barriers. Can data-driven policy really outlast protectionism? Join me as we explore the real winners and losers in this economic tug-of-war. Watch the full video to uncover the truth behind the headlines.
Moving on to thing number 3, Gary, we're talking President Trump versus Jerome Powell. President Trump sent a nice little note over to Jerome Powell. Not sure if you picked that up on social media, but Powell blamed President Trump actually in front of a bunch of central bankers in Europe. The European central bankers, though, do support Trump-like policies back at home. You noted, Gary, thank you for your attention to this matter. Pretty much becoming Trump's famous sign-off, it seems. Gary, thing number 3, Powell discusses UF tariffs at ECB Forum. Really excited to hear what you have to say about this one.
Yeah, so we're gonna have it's so funny, Rob. You're actually saying I'm so excited to hear what happened at this European Central Bankers Forum, right? It's here we are at DKI. It's pretty dorky if we're so excited about a central bankers forum. I know. Here we go.
It's a story that just keeps. You can't make this stuff up.
Yeah, it is. These people are absolutely hilarious. First of all, this forum took place last week in Sintra, Portugal, which, believe it or not, is less than an hour from where I'm sitting here in Lisbon right now. A few weeks ago, I actually took an Uber there. It was unbelievably cheap. I think my Uber was like, I don't know, $20, $25, in dollars. It was a little less in euros. And Sintra is this beautiful old town, really hilly and mountainous. And they have like this, the remains of a 1,000-year-old Moorish castle there, but all kinds of other castles and cathedrals there. And, I spent an exhausting day walking up and down these literally mountains, and seeing these old places, and it was pretty amazing. So for anybody who's interested in this, I highly recommend Sintra for a great day trip out of Lisbon. Anyway, so the European Central Bank had their forum there. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell appeared, and in his "screw you, President Trump" response to President Trump's post on social media calling Chairman Powell an idiot, or I don't remember his exact language, but at this point, it's pretty obvious these two do not like each other. Chairman Powell blamed President Trump's tariffs and the uncertainty caused by them for the reason he hasn't reduced interest rates in the United States. I think his exact wording was they delayed rate cuts when we saw the size of the tariffs, and essentially all inflation forecasts for the United States went up materially as a consequence. Okay, great. So he's basically saying the reason you don't get the interest rates you want is because of President Trump and, all of this. So when he did this, he got a standing ovation from or applause, whatever, from his international counterparts, including ECB President Christine Lagarde, who we insist is not a vampire. So we just want to be clear. We have no direct evidence that Christine Lagarde is a vampire. Please stop saying that.
This is where the suppression comes from.
That's
the
exactly
suppression of our channel. Jerome, Christine. Who else are we lining up?
Right. No, but listen, I'm being positive. Please, nobody say that Christine Lagarde is a vampire. We do not have any documented evidence of that. Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey was in the crowd. Okay, so they're all applauding. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, right, those same countries have had huge tariffs on U.S. goods. And so I find it kind of curious that these top bankers and economists believe that U.S. tariffs are going to create inflation and slow economic growth and create all kinds of economic calamity. But somehow in their own countries, they manage with these same supposedly inflation causing growth, killing restrictions in their own countries. The only thing I can come up with, Rob, is that these bankers like President Trump's policies. They just don't like him personally, and that's making its way into policy. So here we are. Either that, or they just like having protectionist regimes at home but they want unlimited, unrestricted access to the US's giant consumer market. And my response to them is drop your own barriers.
Right.
If you want free trade, then be a free trader.
Right. Gary, yeah, I laugh about all this because it's just like almost a movie or a sitcom at this point, right? But I mean, seriously, how much of this is just optics? I think at there's no way that Powell or Trump or whichever side of the aisle, there's obvious political motivations. They look like political actors, especially on the Fed side, which is supposed to be this non-biased party. I mean, how do they get out of this? Are they going to look bad no matter what? And then how much of this is just a bunch of show?
Well, listen, Rob, anytime you have political actors, and anybody who thinks central bankers are not political actors is not paying attention. Yeah, I know. If you want to put in the comments that the Fed is supposedly an independent institution, feel free to put it in the comments. Like, go ahead. But the fact is, central bankers are political actors. There's no question about that, regardless of what the charter says they are or aren't supposed to be. Let's take this apart, going from east to west. The European central bankers certainly despise President Trump, and they love, running up the score and saying, look, we're the good guys, President Trump's the bad guy. They love that kind of posturing. But the fact is that they have the same kind of Trumpian policies in their own countries, and they never complain about that. Basically, what I think on their end of things is they like the idea of having the benefits of protection on their end and the benefits of free markets on our end. That works to their selfish self-interest. And by the way, it's okay. Everybody's entitled to have their own selfish self-interest, but guess what? So is the United States, right? And when President Trump acts to protect the selfish self-interests of the United States, the rest of the world should not be surprised because they're doing the exact same thing. My only objection is the obvious hypocrisy of them advocating against policies here that they engage in there. And the fact is, it's all appearance. The only reason they get away with it is because you can always win points, trying to score on President Trump. If you're in Europe, okay, that's where we are. Now, on the Federal Reserve side, Rob, when the Fed lowered rates starting last September, I said they made a huge error. And we put this in writing, and we talked about it in this show. What I said at the time was, one, they're too early. They don't have inflation under control. That's still the case. At this point, we are 10 months later, and inflation is still above the 2% target, which itself is still 2% too high. They do not have this under control. It's gotten better, but it's not under control. More importantly, at the time, I said Powell has now made it clear that the Fed is willing to appear partisan, regardless of what his motivations were. When they lowered rates just 2 months ahead of the presidential election, the Fed appeared to be trying to help the incumbent, in this case, the Democratic Party, hold on to the White House. And given the unbelievable animosity between Chairman Powell and President Trump, it's pretty easy to come to the conclusion that Powell wanted to see the Democrats win the election, wanted to keep President Trump from returning to the White House. And it appears that he did what he could to try to stop that and try to put his thumb on the scale for the Democrats. It was too late, didn't work. And now he's really stuck, because if he lowers rates, it will look like he's bending under President Trump's unbelievable public pressure. And if he doesn't, it will look like he is going to try to harm the economy simply as a way of telling President Trump, go blank yourself. And so I think no matter what he does at this point is going to look political. And by the way, this brings me to a point that I've made before. President Trump is not blameless in all of this.
Sure.
I have said before that his public campaign against Chairman Powell is a mistake. And the reason it's a mistake is because now for Chairman Powell to give President Trump what he wants, it has to look like Chairman Powell is caving under the pressure. Had President Trump applied pressure quietly and in private and not done so in public, Powell would have the option to lower rates and not look like he was caving. In general, I think President Trump is very strategic in who he chooses as his targets in this particular situation. I think all parties have acted in a way where nobody has room to maneuver and still save face. Now, as an American citizen, I don't care if these guys save face or not. Do what you can to fix the economy, right?
Yeah.
But human beings are human beings, and we need to understand that they will act in their own self-interest, even if it may not be in the best self-interest of the country.
Gary, just real quick, what's Powell going to do with the next decision?
I think they're gonna stand pat. The employment number we got last week, and I've been saying for years, the employment data is not reliable. As a result, there's just not a whole lot that can be done about it. But basically, I think the Fed looks at two things. They look at inflation, whether it's the CPI, the PPI, the PCE, and those numbers they've come down a lot. It's gotten better. They're pretty stable, but above target. They're sort of in that range where the Fed could think about lowering, but, maybe shouldn't yet. And it looked like they were going to. It looked like they were about to lower rates. And then last week, we got a really strong employment report. Let me rephrase that. It wasn't so much a really strong employment report. It was a good employment report that was stronger than expected. It came in a few tens of thousands of jobs better than what was expected. And I think I saw the revisions. They revised the historical numbers up as well. Basically, what that's saying is that the employment data is strong enough that I think the Fed is going to hold on, at least through the next meeting and not do anything.
Gotcha. We'll keep you in tune with those decisions as they get made on the 5 things. That's what you're watching, this week's version of the 5 things, the fusion issue.